Hey guys, welcome to Cape and Cowl Cafe, and happy holidays. Today we're going to be talking about why I think The Batman Part 2 should be a Christmas movie. If you guys enjoy the video at any point today, I'd really appreciate if you hit that like and subscribe button, but let's just hop right into this. Alright, so I know that we already have a little bit of information on The Batman Part 2. There's a lot of speculation that Clayface is going to be the main villain. I don't care. I know that my pitch probably won't fit in with what we already know about the movie or what it's gonna be. I don't care, alright? This is just what I think the perfect sequel to The Batman would look like. Alright, so we're gonna open up with Gotham City being in an absolutely terrible state. It is really struggling after the events of the last movie. The flood has really devastated the city and left a lot of people homeless, and crime is on the rise. Carmine Falcone is dead. The Riddler killed him off in the last movie, so, after his death, there has been a pretty sizable power vacuum left behind, and, while the Penguin has taken over the drug trade for the Falcone family, rival gangs and families are just fighting tooth and nail to pick up the scraps left behind, so crime is just rampant, and the citizens of Gotham are paying the price. So while crime is on the rise, it's everywhere, it's actually a lot harder to stop now, because after the Riddler exposed so many people in the last movie, a lot of these criminal organizations are actually being way more careful in how they go about their operations. They've gone deep underground, so Batman is actually having a really hard time catching any criminals. Everyone is just being way too careful and paranoid. So in response to this, Batman then comes up with the idea to create a criminal persona and goes by the name Matchis Malone, and he disguises himself as a run-of-the-mill criminal, and he uses this new identity to infiltrate a number of criminal organizations. He then uses the information that he collects, while he's undercover to go apprehend these criminals as Batman later on. And, I just think this is a really good way to show off his detective skills. He finds a new way to fight crime and he adapts to these new circumstances. It's a really good way to show off his intellect, and especially in a movie like this where you won't necessarily have the Riddler as the main villain, you gotta find interesting ways to show off Batman's brains instead of just showing off the brawn, you know what I mean? But what's interesting about this is, as Matchis Malone is wandering the streets of Gotham, he realizes that, he's not on the ground very often, he's always driving through the city in the Batmobile, he's moving across the rooftops, he picks his targets precisely, so he's not everywhere at once, and he doesn't really have a good idea of what's going on in the city all the time. So one thing that he comes across is an alley just filled to the brim with homeless people, and it really affects him. He realizes how much the people of Gotham have been affected by this flood and how much people are really struggling, and it gets to him, it affects him. And I think this is a really good way to build upon the theme of the last movie where at the end of the movie, Batman realizes that he can't just fight crime with fear. He needs to become a symbol of hope for the people. This is just a good way to continue with that theme. Now, despite the efforts of the Batman, the criminals are still going about their business and they are desperately trying to claim their territory in the wake of Falcone's death. And they're going about it in a multitude of different ways. They're racketeering, they're trying to get back into the drug trade, arms dealing, all kinds of stuff. Alright, so next we would cut to Penguin, who is currently running the Falcone drug empire. And while Penguin is pretty successful in this new venture, he quickly realizes that he is running out of money, alright? He doesn't have the financial strength of Carmine Falcone, and he doesn't have the backing, so he needs to do something quick. So what he decides to do is to send his crew out into the city and collect old debts from some of Falcone's old customers. And one of those customers happens to be Ferris Boyle, CEO of GothCorp. Now, Ferris Boyle is just a super shady, messed up criminal individual, and it just so happens that Boyle has racked up quite the debt over the years, purchasing these drugs from Falcone, and he hasn't always paid. So, what Penguin decides to do is send his crew over there and collect the debt. Now, Ferris Boyle has all of his money tied up in other ventures and business deals and all kinds of shady things. He's a shady guy, So what he decides to do is cut one of his company's projects and then use the budget that would have gone to said project to pay off Penguin's men. Now, the project that he decides to cut is the cryogenic research project run by Victor Fries. So Boyle would then take the funds, he would cut the project, and he would give the money to Penguin. And this would lead to the iconic confrontation between Boyle and Victor Fries. Now, as we all know, Fries is just trying to save his wife. She has an irreversible genetic condition, and the only way to save her is freezing her in cryostasis. So she's in that, stasis pod, frozen in time. Freeze is just trying to use this money and this research to save her life. So he is pleading with Boyle. He's saying it's the Christmas season, it's time for giving. He's asking for an extension, just a little more time. Boyle is not budging. He's a selfish individual. He's not having it. So they get into a fight, and then they have the lab accident where, Victor is exposed to the cryogenic chemicals, and Boyle flees the scene, leaving him to what he thought would be Victor Freeze's death. Now, these tragedies are happening all over the city, okay? The criminals are absolutely out of control. This gang war is leaving a trail of victims in its wake. So, on the other side of town, we have Tony Zuko, who is trying to find his place in the criminal world, and he's trying to prove himself to the new gang that he just joined. And the way that he decides to go about this is protection rackets. And one of his first targets just so happens to be Haley's Circus. So Haley's Circus is a traveling circus. It's not native to Gotham, and it wasn't even supposed to stop in Gotham City. They were on their way to Metropolis for a scheduled show, and John and Mary Grayson are just very kind people, and they convinced Mr. Haley, the owner of the circus, that Gotham City needed a little bit of cheer this Christmas season. And so they wanted to do a quick little pit stop in good old Gotham City and do a show for the people, cheer them up, lift their spirits after the recent tragedy and the floods. And little did they know that that little act of kindness would lead to their deaths. So we all know how the story goes. Tony Zuko approaches Mr. Haley and demands that he pays their gang in exchange for protection. Mr. Haley, of course, declines. He says, "Get the hell out of here. We don't want anything to do with you." And we all know what happens next. Tony Zuko and his men, they sabotage the trapeze rig, and, the flying Graysons fall to their death, all except for Dick Grayson. Now, while I do want Dick Grayson to be in this movie, I don't want him to be Robin quite yet. I really want him to be able to breathe as a character. I feel like it would be a disservice to rush his origin story. So I do want to showcase his origin, but save the Robin costumed adventures for a little bit later. Plus, I really want to focus on his relationship with Bruce and Alfred, and I feel like that's kind of hard if you're just rushing straight into the action. Alright, so the rest of Dick Grayson's origin plays out pretty much as normal. The flying Graysons fall to their death. Bruce Wayne is in the crowd. He sees the whole thing, but the interesting thing that I'm going to change is he's not there as Bruce Wayne. He's there as Matchis Malone. Now, I feel like this makes way more sense, especially for the Batman in this universe, because at this point in time, Bruce Wayne doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne. He is so consumed by the Batman persona that he would not be taking the time out of his day to go to the circus. It makes way more sense if he's there as Matchis Malone and he's following up on a lead, he's tailing someone, he's investigating some criminals, and he just so happens to be in the crowd and he witnesses this tragedy unfold before his eyes. It makes way more sense. Alright, so Bruce is in the crowd, he sees the whole thing happen, and obviously he is deeply affected by it. He sees himself in the tragedy, he sees himself in Dick Grayson, and he decides to take him in. So he brings him to the tower, and he introduces him to Alfred. Now, I actually want to portray this as an impulsive decision made by Bruce. He didn't really think this through. This was a response to the trauma that he has. So he brings home Dick Grayson, and Alfred is actually really skeptical of the decision. He is questioning every single part of it. He's, questioning whether or not Bruce is fit to be a father, whether or not he actually has time to take care of the boy, because of his nightly activities as the Batman. So this would lead to some really good dialogue scenes between Bruce and Alfred. So we would then cut to Gordon, who is waiting on a rooftop. He's just called Batman. Batman arrives, and Gordon informs him that there have been reports of an armored man with some kind of ice weapon stealing very specific pieces of technology from various, scientific laboratories throughout the city. Now, Batman is eventually able to intercept Freeze at one of these laboratories, and they come face to face. There is a confrontation, but the fight doesn't last very long. Freeze is able to get a shot off on Batman with his ice gun, and he leaves Batman frozen in a chunk of ice, and Mr. Freeze escapes. Now, Batman is eventually able to get out, but, he's suffering from hypothermia, and he has to go back to Wayne Tower. Alfred's going to take care of him, and because of his condition, he is going to be out of commission for about a day or so. So this actually gives us a lot of time for Bruce and Dick Grayson to interact. There's going to be some nice dialogue, some good character moments. Bruce will probably open up to Dick about his own parents dying, and I don't know. It would just be a nice moment. Now, I'm going to skip over quite a bit here because the rest of the Mr. Freeze portion of the story plays out almost exactly like it does in the Arkham Origins Cold Cold Heart DLC. I mean, you have Mr. Freeze crashing a charity fundraiser hosted by Ferris Boyle.
Bring me Ferris Boyle.
He kidnaps him and brings him back to GothCorp, and he intends to kill him. Now, Batman obviously finds out about this. It's going to be all over the news, so he heads to GothCorp as well. So while Batman is moving through GothCorp, he stumbles upon Victor Freeze's lab, and he pieces together exactly what happened. He finds out that Victor Freeze was actually the victim in this exchange, and Ferris Boyle is the real villain of the story. And, Mr. Freeze was just trying to save his wife. And he also finds out about the drug money and all that stuff. Now, Batman is going to make his way to where Freeze is holding Boyle. There's going to be an epic fight, Batman versus Mr. Freeze. We've all been wanting it for the longest time. Obviously, Batman is going to win in the end, and Freeze is going to be left there, laying on the floor, a single tear running down the side of his face as he is staring at the cryostasis pod holding his wife. Now, Ferris Boyle is going to get up on his feet. He's going to be like, "Thank you, Batman, for taking out this monster. Like, I can't believe you made it in time. Thank you." And I have to pull from the Killer Croc Arkham Knight side mission here. Batman is going to lift up Ferris Boyle by the collar, and he's going to say something like this.
"There's only one monster here."
Now, after everything that Batman has witnessed in this movie, he comes to the conclusion that he needs to use his Bruce Wayne persona a lot more. He needs to use his money to help the city more. He needs to become a public figure. And more than anything, he needs Bruce Wayne to become a symbol just like Batman is. And so he can operate in both the light and the dark. So then, we could have a nice scene where Bruce calls for a press conference and he reintroduces himself to the city and he pledges to help in any way that he can. Bruce then announces to the press that renovations will begin shortly on the old Wayne Manor, and it will be turned into the John and Mary Grayson homeless shelter. Alright, so I would end the movie with Bruce Wayne heading back to Wayne Tower. He's going to spend Christmas Eve with Dick and Alfred. Alfred has prepared a nice little Christmas Eve dinner for them, and then Bruce looks over at the Christmas tree. He notices that it's empty, there's no presents underneath, so Alfred then goes on to say that he's actually bought like about 100 presents for Dick, but he's hidden them away, somewhere in Wayne Tower because he doesn't want Dick Grayson to try to take a peek at any of them. Then we'll cut to the middle of the night. Dick Grayson can't sleep. He gets out of bed and he starts snooping around Wayne Tower. He's looking for those presents that Alfred mentioned earlier, and he stumbles across the old grandfather clock and he starts messing with it, seeing if there's anything hidden inside, or he's looking inside cabinets, under the couch, everywhere. So he accidentally opens up the grandfather clock. It leads to an elevator. He takes the elevator down and he stumbles upon Bruce Wayne in the bat suit with his mask off, sitting at the bat computer. And that is where we would end the movie. Alright, so I think we all love Christmas movies, and while Christmas doesn't have to be like the main thing behind this movie, I think it would be a really good backdrop for the story, especially since Christmas, would really help promote the themes for this movie with, like family and service, and, especially homelessness. Like, there are tons of homeless people, especially during the holiday season, and the winter just makes it really, really tough for them. So I think highlighting issues like that in this movie would be a really good idea, So, I don't know, Batman and Christmas, it really works. So of course I would want the sequel to The Batman to be a Christmas movie. It just makes sense, especially if you're going to do Mr. Freeze as the main villain. I think we've all wanted to see a more accurate Mr. Freeze ever since that Abomination back in the 90s. But I really like this idea. I don't know, I think it would be so good. And I would also love to see Matchis Malone be used in a story like this. When do we ever get to see Matchis Malone in a Batman story? We had him in the Arkham VR game, but I think he is a super underused part of Batman's character. We never get to see it, so. Now, I know a lot of people probably would want to see Dick Grayson become Robin in the second movie, but I feel like it's rushing it, you gotta give it some time to breathe, you gotta let it cook in the oven a little bit. Plus, the third movie could, be about Dick Grayson's first year as Robin. You could adapt Batman and Robin year one if you really want to. Or you could do a story about Batman helping Dick Grayson hunt down Tony Zuko. Just take more time to explore these themes. It's worth it, all right? So, I'm not a director, I'm not a screenwriter. I just thought that this would be a really fun idea to explore, I just love the idea of combining Batman and Christmas. That aesthetic is just so cool, all right? So, I don't know. I really like this idea, though. Alright guys, that's going to be about it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it all, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button, and drop in the comments down below what you thought of the pitch, and give me your ideas for The Batman Part 2. Let's talk about it. But yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys later.